and welcome. Let's get straight into the const keyword. So, what is it? Well, const is the third of three keywords used to declare a variable. And what makes it unique is that it is block scoped, which means if it's inside of a block, only that block has access to it. Const is hoisted to the top of the block scope, but it isn't initialized. So if you try to access a const before the line it has been declared on, you'll run into an error. This is something called the temporal dead zone, where the variable has been declared, but you cannot access it. And const cannot be reassigned values, and it's also considered a more modern approach compared to var. All right, let's look at the code syntax. So we can declare a const the same way as var or let, but instead we'll use the const keyword. Okay, now let's move on to some theoretical questions. So, as mentioned before, the most common theoretical questions I see for const involves describing the differences between var, let, and const. We'll have a comparison video after we cover all three. But you might be asked some of the definitions we covered earlier. This might be in the form of a question like, what is the scope of const? And you'll want to say it is block scoped. And you might also be asked about how const behaves during variable hoisting. And you can say something like it's hoisted to the top of its block scope, but cannot be accessed until we reach the line the variable has been declared on. And you might also be asked about the temporal dead zone. And you can say the temporal dead zone is an instance where the variable has been hoisted and exists, but it cannot be accessed or used until it's been declared. All right, on to some coding questions. So you might be given a snippet where we have a constant that has a value of an object. You'll be asked what will be logged in this scenario. Now, we know that const cannot be reassigned. However, if you have an object or an array assigned to a constant, you can still modify the elements within the object or array. So in this case, we would log a value of 1 to the console. However, if we tried to reassign the entire object, then we would get an error. All right, let's take a look at another example. So you might be asked a question like this, and you'll be asked what the output would be. So at the first iteration, we would log 0. Then we would attempt to increment the const, but we cannot reassign a value to a const, so we would get a type error. Now, you might be asked how you could fix this using a loop and a constant. And you could do something like this. Here we have a for of loop, where we iterate through an array of numbers, and at each iteration we have a new constant with its own block scope, which means we aren't reassigning any values to const and therefore aren't violating any rules. And so I actually think this is a pretty tricky question in general, but I do think it would be good to have this in your arsenal because you really never know what's going to be asked. Cool, so that covers today's episode, and in the next one, we'll take a look at a side-by-side comparison of var, let, and const. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one.